None of this dribble would have an ounce of political traction if it were not subordinated to the aim and purpose of international finance capital. Capitalism, communism, socialism, free marketeerism are one and the same theory at baseline. And the view of humanity is that we are economic units, either productive or consumerist economic units. The point of all of this, of course, is not diversity. They don't want diversity. That's of no use to international finance capital. There's no profit in diversity. There is profit in the amorphous grey mass of pointless existence, where the only thing that people have is what they work for. Money.
No other political party or entity is prepared to identify and name out and shame the people who are actually responsible for this financial occupation of our country, namely the banks, namely the international capitalism, international finance, their vulture fund subsidiaries. The best that people on the far left can come up with is simple slogans, which is quite blatantly obvious to anyone with half a brain, that poor people are being exploited and robbed by rich institutions that can get away with it. But it's not that simple. Those rich institutions have literally a license to print money. Those rich institutions have the ability, with government and European Central Bank support, to keep our country in subjugation, under financial subjugation.
And Irish people are subordinated to the interests of production, and production, distribution and exchange are subordinated to the interests of parasitic international finance capitalism that has reduced our farmers to the status of serfs, our workers to the status of wage slaves, and by means of an out-of-control national debt or government debt of in excess of €200 billion and an additional €200 billion in private debt, has in effect mortgaged future generations of Irish people with the chains of debt, making them debt slaves to international finance tapeworms.
It's not that they don't understand things, it's they just have a different agenda. That's the problem.
The argument is always made, Irish people don't want to do those jobs. Australian people don't want to do those jobs. America, suddenly everyone in the West doesn't want to do jobs that actually have now been given to people who are willing to just simply do them for a lower wage, but they were certainly willing to do them before.
Yeah, of course they were willing to do them before. They just aren't willing to do them for a pittance. And that is a very reasonable thing for them to say, because that's slavery.
2010 seen the handover of what was left of fiscal autonomy to the foreign troika of the ECB, EU Commission and IMF that insisted on Irish taxpayers being forced to shoulder the gambling losses of foreign bondholders in bust Irish banks.
They just have a different agenda. The economists around them are very intelligent people, but they've been asked the question is, how can we maximise gross national product? How can we maximise gross domestic product? And the economists will give them the answer.
The discredited Fianna Fáil Green government set up NAMA that seized the toxic distressed assets of building developers, that splurged on the euro-created credit bubble and sold those assets well below their market value to foreign vulture fund parasites under the veil of secrecy and at the behest of the Troika that demanded prompt repayment of loans provided to indemnify the gambling bondholders in our bust banks. As well as the great Irish sell-off by NAMA of distressed assets on their books, NAMA also intervened to effectively stop house building and sold off land banks that could be used for residential development to vulture funds that are sitting on that land that is the principal cause of the housing crisis of today.
We need to build houses, and they need to be government houses, and we need to not to be ideologically locked in just because we're a right-wing party into the notion that there should be no government housing stock. There should be a considerable amount of housing stock held by the state, built by the state. You cannot have mass immigration and solve the housing crisis. It's about impoverishing people. It's about deliberately impoverishing people in order to increase profits. Economic efficiency. Move the poor people to the rich countries for economic efficiency. When we have an economic boom, we have a huge influx of cheap labour, which keeps wages down because supply and demand would otherwise suggest that you'd have to pay people more. So you have an economic boom and the ordinary people don't benefit, and the migrants are taken advantage of, and big business and global capitalism in particular benefits from it.
It's a matter of fact that mass immigration from former Soviet bloc EU accession states after 2004, coupled with the credit bubble and the ECB setting of interest rates, caused the building bubble that caused the overheating of the Irish economy, with the result of the economic crash of 2008.
You have an economic downturn and you get a bank bailout. And those same people who never benefited from the boom in the first place are expected to pick up the tab. And, as I say, it's the red banners in the street with the hammer and sickle on them going, more of this, more of this, more of what? International finance capitalism. When do we want it? Now. The whole cabal of the left as well, the stupid left and the collaborative left, intent on reducing to malleable units all things in the service of capital. Socialism needs suffering. Socialism thrives on misery. And they have to smile now and say the revolution is around the corner. The revolution, comrades, is around the bend. I will tell them straight, we are the revolution. We are.
The Irish nation is not immune to the deadly global epidemic that is killing nations, and that global epidemic has a name, and that name is liberalism, to which the only effective antidote or cure is authentic nationalism.
If they collectively have an identity that is bigger than the pursuit of money or a wage packet at the end of the week, they become especially dangerous, because they might actually take back into their own hands the control of their own destiny.
What we want and what we demand is that the financial system must be put at the service of the Irish nation. That's what Pearse and Connolly and those who gave their lives in 1916 gave their lives for. That Ireland and its natural resources are indefeasible and belong to the Irish people, not to foreign interests and not to private financial interests either.
This is our country, and within our country we come first. How do we employ the most people? How do we give them decent paying jobs that they can form and raise families in a reasonable degree of comfort? What we do need to do is to create our own currency and print our own currency, and that should not be printed privately by the banking system. It should be the state. The state alone has the right to issue the currency for the nation. The state alone has the right to control monetary policy. And that is not a socialist thing to say. That is just a national thing to say. All of these statistical figures have no meaning. People matter. People matter. And the national idea is at core is any given question. What's the national interest?